Welcome to this edition of Workplace Culture Wisdom, a conversation series with experienced leaders. Hello there, I'm Kathy Jourdain, and I am hosting the Workplace Culture Wisdom series. And with me today is Tova Sherman. She's the CEO of the reachAbility Association, and I had the pleasure of recently being featured on their Within Reach podcast, and it was one of the best ones that I've done. I was hosted so well by both Blake and Shelley, and I've been sharing that pretty widely
Thank
because of
you.
that. Oh, very welcome. And Tova, I'm delighted that you agreed to be part of our Workplace Culture Wisdom series, and I would love for you to take a minute here to introduce yourself to our viewers.
Absolutely. And I thank you for respecting my desire to introduce myself because often people do introduce me and I'm like a little embarrassed. So I just rather be fabulous to myself.
Great.
Truth
Love that.
is, no, Kathy, great to see you and love being with you. I love what you bring to the table. And I'm always interested in speaking to you because it's always, as I like to call it, a win-win-win because we get so much information and we're able to support folks around us with that. So thank you again for being a sharer of information. I like the name of your podcast. I'm not sure I can say it without stuttering, but workplace culture wisdom sounds fantastic. And certainly my 25 plus years in the NGO field has positioned me to be someone who can certainly comfortably discuss what that looks like in an NGO and, of course, in any kind of mainstream working environment. And as you also know, I'm, in addition to being a CEO of reachAbility, I'm an author of the Win-Win-Win book around inclusionisms for disability confidence. And also, I public speak across the country, specifically on the issues of workplace culture inclusion of our most marginalized citizens. So I like to think I bring a hefty, not just sort of private sector, public sector work, but also as a first person voice, as a person who does live on the ADHD spectrum. Your listeners probably won't be terribly surprised, or viewers. And you'll be picking that up throughout our conversation when I can't keep it in my head. But most importantly, to let you know, is I like to also believe that I'm a model of genuine hope and capacity for persons with ADHD spectrum disorder and anyone on the neurodiversity scale, because I also live with mental illness.
Thank you for that. And I am also not surprised about the ADHD just in the conversations with you. And you are so vibrant. And I totally understand why people would want to have you as a speaker, speaking on any of those topics for sure.
Appreciate that. I appreciate it.
And I love your win-win-win book. Thank you for gifting me a copy of that. I love I'm going to say the simplicity of it, but the visual layout, the easy readability in all of that. It's great. And I love the size of it. And I think you did a fantastic job with
Well,
that.
thank you very much. And again, anyone who's interested in finding out more about that, just check out reachability.org. It's a one-stop shop for us in terms of all the services we do, which, as you know, are free for any clients, any marginalized citizen, anybody who's facing a barrier. I just happen to be personally someone who specializes in the area of disability.
Right. Perfect. So you just told me before we started to record this about next practice. And so I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what that is and what it means, especially as it relates to workplace culture.
Absolutely. It's a great place to jump in. I'm sort of known for my, I call them sound bites, but my sayings, which is really what drove the book, was my staff going, get those on paper before you forget them, which means immediately. The driving sayings, I believe people hear them in a way that we don't hear a long statement about what's the right thing to do. And therefore, I also felt the term next practice spoke greatly to what not only I'm asking employers to do across the country, but I'm asking my own staff to practice. And what I mean by that is we all hear best practices, but who determined that and what does that really mean? And so I always felt that best practice was cutting sort of our hands off because we should be focused on and pursuing, certainly someone in my role does, next practices, what's really emerging instead of using, there's terms that come in and out of fashion as a really quick example, people of color. I don't particularly care for that term, neither do my friends who are people of color. So I stopped using it, but I don't advise other people to use it. We talk about individualizing and not grouping people, which is always the greatest offense. So I really want to say that next practice is where you keep your head clearly in what's emerging as trends, what's healthy, what makes sense for a healthy workplace culture, and grab those ideas and then share them with that fresh perspective, that next practice approach with the leaders in this country who are genuinely interested in doing things correctly and building those cultures, but don't necessarily have specific action tools, lots of big statements. So next practices is my commitment to people I talk to understand what's coming down the pipe, not just what's already been down the pipe, if that makes sense.
Tova, I really love that because I personally have had some challenges also thinking about best practices for exactly the reason that you've described, but I've never heard anyone say next practice. So I'm going to be adopting that now
All
in
right, the
my.
next book that comes out with that name on it, we're tracking them to hearing your I'm just kidding, your podcast. But most importantly is it's really what I believe. It's just a belief. So I say it in a way that's again grabs people, it's concise.
Right.
That's sort of what I do, make a difference because you can win, win, win. These are all things I deeply believe, but I find that they're a good place to grab. I have a LinkedIn account and I write an article every 2 weeks because
Mhm.
Blake makes me, my assistant. But that's really true. And most importantly, has been some of the responses have been so amazing because they get that we
Right.
all need to stick to some of those next practice ideas. We all need to understand what a healthy workplace culture looks like. There's a lot of information coming at us, whether it's Harvard or Forbes or just the guy down the street and the guy down the hall in your office. So it's really about identifying things that make sense to you and making them your own. And that's what I hope all of your viewer listeners do with our conversation today.
And Tova, what are some of the things that you've identified in next practice for people to take up?
I think that the words are out there, but I don't think the actions have kicked in. So, for instance, I like to say to folks who have the capacity, larger agencies, organizations, government organizations, or for profit businesses, I tell them a lot of them things like just little examples. Why not an accommodation fund so we don't have to ask for something special and additional? Why not an existing fund that you put aside? Because, for instance, I do this for lawyers. So, lawyers out there, I will pay, but I always have to put aside an amount in case something comes up in my budget. Why is it that nobody will do that for accommodation when we know? And here in Nova Scotia, if I may speak to that, we have the largest per capita population of people who say the words, I have a disability. Forget the ones who don't even think they have a disability. So we have this population that we're somehow saying we need workers, we need this, we need that. But what we need is to remove the bias that gets in the way of us including people and creating a healthy workplace culture because it's been shown and I'd have to go back to the source of it because I pull a lot of quotes, but it was Harvard or Forbes and they specifically said that 30% improvement in enjoyment of work and success during work, all because you interact and bring in different groups such as persons with disabilities. A lot of people ask me about cognitive disability as of late. I wrote an article a few weeks ago and I was so surprised how many people were talking about it and needing to sort of say, we get it, but we aren't doing it. And so for me, it's all about hard actions. Just like the book sort of says, here's what the word means, here's how to apply it. Because part of my ADHD spectrum disorder reality is I must have action.
Well, and what's so interesting to me about that, first of all, I love the idea of an accommodation fund. Put it in the budget, make it
Just
like
an
just
example.
part of the conversation. And recently, I did a series of respectful workplace sessions with a local employer. And one of the things that I talked about was accommodations. And I said that I think more recently that the place where we need more accommodations is around neurodiversity.
100%. That's
Yeah.
basically been what I'm discovering. I always thought,
Right.
we get well, we get somebody with a wheelchair needs a wrap or something like that. And I don't mean to minimize those requirements and in
Absolutely.
any way
Right.
suggest it's easy for them. That's not what I'm saying. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is when someone starts talking about neurodiversity, which just so I'm clear with your I always want to say listeners, but it's viewer listeners, so forgive me, but you're all included. But one of the things that I think is really important that we talk about is the fact that whether a viewer or a listener, the workplace culture is going to be deeply affected if we are not able to kind of action these words. And you're hearing it around cognitive because people literally do not know what to do with what they don't see. But I'm going
Right.
to give you the secret to why we have so much bias.
All
I'm going
right.
to
Good.
lay it
I
out, and
hear
then
it.
maybe we can start picking at it
Yes.
like a something we can, a little picture. So the reason we have so much bias is that people don't see disabilities as being a challenge. They don't see them as being something you deal with like everybody else. What they see is that you are broken. And in all fairness, the medical paradigm was for many years, you are broken, you require fixing. And that paradigm is carried over to society. So people can't get past the idea that you're broken if you have a disability. Now, I can't see the disability. I don't know exactly how it affects your brain. I don't know exactly how it affects you cognitively. And again, let me go back because I skipped past the more defining neurodiversity. There's the ADHD kicking in. But what I want to say is I include cognitive disabilities, which it was originally termed for in the 90s, was to cover cognitive disability. But we now understand neurodiversity to include also mental illnesses. I do want to distinguish between cognitive and mental illness just in terms of some of the realities of it. They're not the same thing. I'm not going to get into that here because that's definitions, but I do want to say, please, when I speak to the neurodiversity of folks, I am including both people living with mental health illnesses, which affect them often differently than someone with a cognitive disability. I happen to be comorbid. I have both. So obviously, it's very hard to separate that.
What an awful term, comorbid.
Yeah. So again, medical, there you go. The medical terms are killers. I mean, there was a
Oh,
time in the 50s, people would drive 8 blocks not to go buy the house with someone with polio, right?
mm.
People are so ingrained with how disability means you're broken. And hirers want to be good. They even have a daughter that's on the ADHD spectrum. You know what I'm saying? They're right here. It's everybody. It's all of us. That's why I'm so shocked by how bias has permeated our very thinking. And we can look at our own child and go, you're broken,
Yeah,
versus
and
you
I
have the
know,
possibilities.
right. And growing up for me, we never talked about these things. Like neurodiversity wasn't a thing, um,
Yeah.
or gender diversity or any of those realities. It's not that they didn't exist, it's just we didn't talk about them in the same way. And I know lots of people who've been getting adult diagnoses of ADHD and like people I went to school with, and they're like, my life makes so much more sense now that I understand how my brain has been trying to cope with a world that doesn't actually accommodate me that well.
Absolutely. So now we're in a better place. Let's be real. We are in a better place and we're glad about that. But the truth is, we have to understand that we are talking about our population, our people, and you cannot stand out there and go, what, where are the competent people? If, for instance, you're scanning only 30% of the population.
Right. That makes
That's
so
the
much
kind of
sense.
stuff that
Mm,
is reality and is going to affect things. But I'm working with a lot of different employers who are really open to
mm,
wanting this culture, wanting,
right.
and I'm going to use a term I use a lot because I think it's really just a latest term. Again, next practice words for things that are going on, and that is belonging. The
Mm,
sense of
yes.
belonging, if one addresses belonging in the workplace and looks at the stats, you will find the differences between when you include community of persons with disabilities and when you don't. And the differences are stark in terms of success, workplace culture, the term culture even coming up, people feeling comfortable enough to be authentic. That's what a healthy workplace culture is. It is where there is a sense of belonging, and that sense of belonging is transferable and actionable, not just a bunch of committees talking about it. Forgive me.
No, I'm all about the action as well. Like it's great to have the ideas, but what does that look like in practice? Speaking of which, I've been to your office, and you and I have had a prior conversation when I was talking to people about different kinds of work environments.
Yes.
Your office is definitely a welcoming space. Like I felt that the moment I walked in the door. You've got beautiful artwork all over the place, and it extends beyond the sense of what you see physically. And I mean, I sense that anyway, and Blake spoke about that as well when we did the podcast. And so I'd love to just ask you what what are the things that you are doing, you personally and as an organization, that makes your organization such a welcoming and inclusive place?
Okay, so the first thing I'm doing is being authentic. I mean, I used to think I was very authentic, but part of learning from your ADHD spectrum disorder and living with mental illness sometimes can make you feel maybe more confident than you should be on those matters. But I can look at you today and say that I have a honest, authentic relationship with everybody who works here. They know I live with ADHD, and I don't say that just to throw the disability around because they understand I'm also going to need accommodation. I'm going to normalize here's another action, I think, is I'm going to normalize the conversation between boss and employee. And I don't even love the term, but just to be clear with you, the senior, that thing, hierarchy, and I normalize the belonging piece by simply saying, here's what I need, and opening up the door for them to go, oh, because here's what I need. Versus I'll just pocket my needs because there isn't an employer in North America who's going to want to hear about them. But
And
here's Tova saying, here's my needs, here's
right,
my
right,
accommodation. And then everyone around me is going, well, here's mine, here's mine. And you realize that whether it's disability related or not, we
right.
all
Yes.
require a certain amount of accommodation. Maybe it's your daughter's off school, snow days. Some people in my office require accommodation, So to me, it's about sending the signal. I call it safe signaling because you're sending a safe signal out that you as a boss are comfortable doing this.
Right. And I definitely, in all the conversations I had about workplace environment, or type of environment, people did talk about, well, flexibility. And I like your use of the word accommodations normalizes it. And yes, someone who needs to take a day at home because their kid is off for a snow day is a type of accommodation. And it's that, like, even in workplaces that require people to be fully in person, there's flexibility that can be built into that
Always.
place.
Always. But I'll also say I don't have a signed in or out clock. I have an honor system.
Mm.
People get the work done or they don't. At the end of the week, the work is either done or it isn't. And if it isn't, we're going to have a conversation about not me saying, hey, what the hell's wrong with you? Which is the wrong kind of curiosity. That's
Right.
another
Yes,
thing.
absolutely.
Curiosity. What I call, again, authentic, real curiosity, not what the
Yes.
hell's wrong with you curiosity. So again, I'm saying, let's stay curious by saying, what is it that's stopping you from being able to achieve this?
Mm.
Versus why the hell did you not meet the deadline? So
Right.
those kinds of thoughts for me are really empowering to everyone around me, but also me. I'm giving everyone permission to do their best, but not under my thumb, because that's not my way. If anything, I
Right.
probably, whatever the opposite of micromanaging is probably me, because I like to let people kind of build their own castle. But at the same time, if the castle's misbuilt, we're going to have to stop the train and take a good look at why. And
Yeah.
can I help? Is it a right fit? Is it the wrong fit? Whatever that is. And then I'm
Mhm.
willing to take on what then happens because not
Yeah.
everyone is a good fit in every business. And as
Oh,
much as
yeah.
we want to try, there's a point where you have to say this cannot work anymore. And it's a detriment to everyone. So if everyone who's listening and watching us thinks Tova's just advocating for find that disabled person and give them a job and the hell whether he does it or not. No, no, no. I believe right person, right job. But if you're not looking at the whole plethora of people for that job and you only want that job done one way and one way only, then you're full of shit if you say you're inclusive.
So true. Is there anything else that you want to
I don't
say?
know. I thought that was a good closer. I thought that was one of my dramatic, I wanted a little drum at the end, da-da-dum.
Needed a mic drop, right?
But I'll pick it back up and we'll keep talking. That's fine
All
too.
right. Well, we're close to the end of the session for today. So Are there any other thoughts around accommodations or inclusion or belonging or workplace culture that you'd like to share with the people who are watching this video?
100%. If you and your staff have not sat down and had a conversation, whether through facilitation or your own internal workings, have not had a conversation about the term belonging and what it means and why it's so powerful. The stats around belonging in the workplace, which is a culture builder, that's the ultimate culture builder, is belonging for everybody. Very rare, but I can talk about that. But if you haven't talked to your staff, especially if there's multi-tiers and it's large, about the importance of belonging in your workplace, then I'm not sure what you're doing here with us, because that's a basic now. And without acknowledging that you're committed to it, by also creating an environment where people can be signaled that there is safety in being able to speak. You are safe to speak in this environment. That's what a workplace culture needs to work to. I don't mean talk about how, bitch all day. I mean, creatively speak to your strengths and bring those strengths to the team, because that's ultimately what they're going to benefit from.
That is a great last reflection to leave this conversation
Mic
on.
drop. There we
Right.
go.
And I really have, well, I enjoy the conversations with you, and I so appreciate that we had an opportunity to have another conversation. And I look forward to future conversations. And I thank you again for being on our Workplace Culture Wisdom series.
I really appreciate it. And I always enjoy speaking to you because you always have great questions and a wonderful sense of authentic curiosity. So thank you.
You are welcome. Go to worldviewprograms.com to learn more about our Healthy Workplace Culture Program options.